Just under 2 years ago, we were promised a brave new Middle East. To some, this was a harbinger of Arab Renaissance and Palestinian justice. To others, a catastrophic crumbling of Israel's bedrock security assumptions. Now, as we face another war in Gaza 4 years after Operation Cast Lead, it turns out that things are less stark. The new war is not yet so different from the old one. But regional shifts have narrowed Israel's freedom to maneuver, and a ground invasion of Gaza would mean that all bets are off. Consider Egypt, whose new president, Mohamed Morsi, had described Israeli leaders as vampires and pledged to rebalance Egyptian policy towards Hamas in Gaza, and away from Fatah, the Islamists' ineffective rivals in the occupied West Bank. Well, Egypt did not respond to last week's assassination of the Hamas commander Ahmad Jabari by egging on rocket fire, funneling in military assistance, or ripping up the peace treaty with Israel. Instead, Morsi recalled Egypt's ambassador from Tel Aviv, no more than his predecessor did 4 years ago, and dispatched his prime minister to posture with Hamas leaders. The reasons for this quietist policy, many Egyptians would call it supine, are simple. Post-revolutionary Egypt is in a pitiful state. It desperately needs a loan from the IMF, which means staying on the right side of Washington. The Egyptian army, which receives enormous sums from the U.S., has no interest in getting entangled. And the Sinai Peninsula, which abuts Gaza, has been awash with weapons and militants over the past year thanks to the revolutionary chaos in Egypt, to the point where Morsi has been demolishing the tunnels into Gaza with as much enthusiasm as his predecessor, Hosni Mubarak. This is why Egyptian intelligence officers have been furiously mediating between Israelis and Palestinians over the past days. They know that, if Israel invades Gaza with ground forces, Egyptian policy towards Gaza would be put under unbearable strain. 4 years ago, Egyptian forces helped secure crossing points between Sinai and Gaza, facilitating the IDF's invasion, and thereafter joined the Israeli blockade of Gaza. Israel knows that, this time round, it can expect no such cooperation from Egypt if it invades. Egypt could choose to loosen controls on tunnels and crossing points further, and tacitly allow arms to flow in. Eli Yishai, Israel's interior minister, has been quoted as saying that the goal of the operation is to send Gaza back to the Middle Ages. But, this grotesque bombast aside, Israel's leadership would far prefer to pursue its objectives from the sky alone. The decision to call up 75,000 reservists is being treated as evidence of an inevitable invasion, but it's more likely an effort to send a signal to Hamas, and so compel a ceasefire on favorable terms. Only 30% of the Israeli public supports the use of ground forces, and Israel goes to the polls in 2 months' time. While it's likely that the imminent elections shaped Netanyahu's decision to launch air strikes, these could also serve as a constraint. Israeli leaders can also point to the apparent success of the Iron Dome system, reported to have demonstrated a remarkable 85% success rate in intercepting rockets, as a reason for keeping troops out. The past 4 years have brought other changes, too. Hamas's external leadership supported the Syrian uprising and abandoned its base in Damascus, with Iran reportedly cutting funding for Hamas as a result. But the group has also benefited from the impotence of the Fatah-controlled Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and the largest of Turkey, which broke with Israel after the Israeli raid on a flotilla to Gaza in 2010, and Qatar. All this means that, despite the Arab Spring and the political transformation of Egypt, Hamas is neither all-powerful nor teetering on defeat. Hamas knows that it has big challenges at home, in particular from the more extreme Salafite groups, such as Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In response, Hamas has both cracked down on its rivals and adopted more extreme positions to avoid being outflanked, a factor that contributed to the outbreak of this war, and makes a ceasefire much harder to achieve. Hamas has little to gain from an Israeli ground assault into Gaza, but it also has much to lose from taking on its more radical rivals within Gaza. Hamas does not want a ceasefire at the cost of a civil war, and will need to save face. The paradox is that even as the Middle East changes at a dizzying pace, Syria in tatters, Jordan facing unprecedented protests, and Iran being strangled by sanctions, the fundamentals remain. The emergence of an Islamist Egypt has not prevented Israel from launching over 1,000 airstrikes in Gaza, and has perhaps created greater Egyptian incentive and opportunity to lean on Hamas and broker a truce. And then, back to the status quo.